in Tragedy and Hope, here's what Quigley wrote. He said, I know of the operation of this network, there he called it a network, because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years during the 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims, and have for much of my life been close to it and to many of its instruments. In general, my chief difference of opinion is that it wishes to remain unknown. In his book, The Anglo-American Establishment, he says, the Rhodes Scholarship established by the terms of Cecil Rhodes' seventh will are known to everyone. What is not so widely known is that Rhodes, in 5 previous wills, left his fortune to form a secret society which was to devote itself to the preservation and expansion of the British Empire. And what does not seem to be known to anyone is that this secret society continues to exist to this day. To be sure, it is not a childish thing like the Ku Klux Klan. It does not have any secret robes, secret hand clasps, or secret passwords. It does not need any of these, since its members know each other intimately. It probably has no oaths of secrecy nor any formal procedure of initiation. It does, however, exist and holds secret meetings. This group is, as I shall show, one of the most important historical facts of the 20th century. Now, one of the original leaders of the organization, I should say, as I mentioned before, was William Stead, who wrote the book, The Last Will and Testament of C.J. Rhodes. And here's what he said in his book. He said, quote, Mr. Rhodes was more than the founder of a dynasty. He aspired to be the creator of one of those vast, semi-religious, quasi-political associations which, like the Society of Jesus, have played so large a part in the history of the world. To be more strictly accurate, he wished to found an order as the instrument of the will of the dynasty. An order. Not an organization, an order. Think something you pledge your allegiance to. Something you die for. Now, in Cecil Rhodes' own handwritten manuscript, here's what he said. I contend that we English are the finest race in the world, and that the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race. What scheme could we think of to forward this object? I look into history, and I read the story of the Jesuits. I see what they were able to do in a bad cause, and I might say, under bad leaders. In the present day, I became a member of the Masonic Order. I see the wealth and power they possess, the influence they hold. And I think over their ceremonies, and I wonder what a large body of men can devote themselves to what at times appear to be most ridiculous and absurd rites, without any object and without any end. The idea, gleaming and dancing before one's eyes like a will-o'-the-wisp, at last frames itself into a plan. Why should we not form a secret society with but one object, the furtherance of the British Empire and the bringing of the whole uncivilized world under British rule? That was the genesis. That was the spirit, the starting point. Now, in Quigley's own words, the goal of this secret society was, quote, and this is where we overlap with that brilliant presentation made by Alex the other day. My gosh, he went so fast, but if you slow down the recording and you listen to it, he says everything that I'm telling you in much too much time. But here are the quotes. Here's what Quigley said. The goal of the secret society was nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. The system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. Does that sound like you've read that in the newspaper? The Bilderberger Group has a secret meeting, and they've got the G7 another secret meeting. You can't get in. If anybody gets in from the press, they're sworn to secrecy. They can't talk about it. This is what he's referring to. On page 4 of the Anglo-American Establishment, Quigley says, this organization has been able to conceal its existence quite successfully, and many of its most influential members, listen to this, many of its most influential members, satisfied to possess the reality rather than the appearance of power. They're not running for office. That's the appearance of power. They want the reality of power, the ones who control those who run for office. So, being content with the reality rather than the appearance of power are unknown, even to close students of British history, partly because of the deliberate policy of secrecy, which this group has adopted, partly because the group itself is not closely integrated, but rather appears as a series of overlapping circles or rings, partly concealed by being hidden behind formally organized groups of no obvious political significance. And regarding the conspiratorial structure, Quigley tells us this. He says, quote, in the secret society, Rhodes was to be leader, Stead, Brett, who was Lord Esher, and Milner were to form an executive committee called the Society of the Elect. Arthur, Lord Balfour, Sir Harry Johnston, Lord Rothschild, Albert Lord Grey, and others were listed as potential members of a circle of initiates, while there was to be an outer circle known as the Association of Helpers, later organized by Milner as the Round Table Organization. And after the death of Cecil Rhodes, the organization fell under the control of Lord Alfred Milner, who recruited young men from the upper class of society to become part of the Association of Helpers. So there you get it, a very short summary of how this thing was really structured. And this Association of Helpers were officially, or I should say unofficially, known as Milner's Kindergarten, because they were the young students coming out of the fine universities in Britain. And they were placed into the power centers, eventually became the round tables, and were the inner wings of the larger front groups. And we must remember, ladies and gentlemen, that when we review this chronicle, that the primary purpose of secret societies is deceit. Otherwise, why be secret? What's the secret? If you're hiding something, I don't care what it is, you're deceiving, or at least preventing the truth from being known. Not just because you're hiding a secret doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, I might have a secret present for my wife. I don't want her to know about it yet. So that's a secret. So just having a secret is not bad, but this is a whole organization built around something which they don't want anybody to know about. And to the gullible public, they tell their plans in form that is very misleading. You don't know what they're talking about. It sounds good, but they speak to each other in a language that they know exactly what they mean. And sometimes they actually come out and speak about it in plain English if they think that their communication is private. And here's a good example, and then I'll skip over to getting to the end here. Here's a good example. One of the most prominent members of the Milner's Kindergarten was Alfred Toynbee, a renowned historian. Everybody's heard about Toynbee. He was a professor at the London School of Economics. He was the director of studies at the Royal Institute of International Affairs. That was the front, one of the front groups of the Round Table. A British intelligence agent, I didn't know about that till I did a little research, and the author of a 12-volume work, The Study of History, which extols the virtue of world government based on the model of collectivism. Now, in the November 1931 issue of International Affairs, this is an insider journal of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, here's what Toynbee wrote. He said, I will hereby repeat that we are, at present, working discreetly, but with all our might, to wrest this mysterious political force called sovereignty out of the clutches of the local national states of our world. And all the time we are denying with our lips what we are doing with our hands. Now, world government doesn't just happen by writing articles or books, or when people meet power centers, and Quigley explains how it happens. Congress. How does this come about? Now we get down to the nuts and bolts. Through Lord Milner's influence, he says, I'm quoting Quigley again, through Lord Milner's influence, these men were able to win influential posts in government, in international finance, and become the dominant influence in British imperial affairs and foreign affairs up to 1939. In 1909 through 1913, they organized semi-secret groups known as roundtable groups, and in the chief British dependencies and the United States, that's where they were formed. These still function in 8 countries. The task was given to Lionel Curtis, who established in England and each dominion a front organization to the existing roundtable group. This front organization, called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, had as its nucleus in each area the existing submerged roundtable group. In New York, it was known as the Council on Foreign Relations and was the front group for J.P. Morgan and Company. So there at last, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the ubiquitous Council on Foreign Relations. And we are informed that it was spawned by a secret society which still exists today, that it is a front for a roundtable group, originally embodied in J.P. Morgan and Company, but now in the Rockefeller Consortium, and that its primary goal is no longer the expansion of the British Empire, but global collectivism with control in private hands, administered in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, those are their words, not mine. I was prepared originally to give you examples of all the names of people who are presidents, secretaries of state, secretaries of defense, Supreme Court justices, heads of ABC, CBS, NBC, all in media organizations, and you get bored after a while. All the major corporations. Ladies and gentlemen, when they say that the members of the Council on Foreign Relations are the secret government of the United States, they ain't kidding. It's real.
Amen.
I come finally to the end. The problem arises, if this is the case, we get back to this thing, democracy. The problem arises, how do these people expect to control the masses of the world and yet let them have the vote? Doesn't this seem counterintuitive? We've got the vote. We're free because we elect our own dictators. We elect our presidents. We're free because we go to the ballot and vote for the candidates that they select. So how do we do this? And of course, the Quigley formula is simply this: to perpetuate the deception of democracy and the illusion of self-rule. In order to do that, all that is necessary is to glorify a two-party system and then control both of them. Now listen to Quigley as he approvingly explains this strategy. Quigley speaking now. The national parties and their presidential candidates, with the Eastern establishment assiduously fostering the process behind the scenes, moved closer together and nearly met in the center with almost identical candidates and platforms, although the process was concealed as much as possible by the revival of obsolescent or meaningless war cries and slogans, often going back to the Civil War. The argument that the two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies, one perhaps of the right and the other of the left, is a foolish idea, acceptable only to the doctrinaire and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical, so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extreme shifts in policy. Either party in office becomes in time corrupt, tired, unenterprising, and vigorless. Then it should be possible to replace it every 4 years, if necessary, by the other party, which will be none of these things, but which will still pursue with new vigor approximately the same basic policies. Does that sound familiar to you, ladies and gentlemen? I'm going to close it right there. If you don't get it, I don't have to explain it to you. Thank you very much.